My name is Katinat Chen, and the first memory I have of my life isn't a birthday or a toy. It's a diaper. I was 5 years old, standing on a plastic stool in a cramped two-bedroom apartment in Flushing, Queens, changing my baby brother on the kitchen counter, because there wasn't space anywhere else. The smell of formula and bleach filled the air. My mother said it proudly, like passing down an heirloom. In the Chen family, the eldest daughter is the second mother. That was our tradition. My father worked underground welding subway rails, his hands always blackened with soot. My mother stayed home, earning $1,800 a month babysitting other people's kids for the city. But when her shift ended, mine began. I learned to heat oatmeal before I learned to spell my name. I knew which bottle each baby preferred, which lullaby stopped the crying fastest. Our apartment walls were thin. You could hear the 7 train screaming past every few minutes, but the silence inside was heavier. There was no time for laughter, no space for childhood. At 5, I wasn't anyone's daughter anymore. I was a tiny, unpaid caretaker holding a family together with trembling hands. Sometimes I'd stand on the balcony, watching other girls hopscotch below, their mothers calling them in for dinner. I'd imagine mine doing the same, but instead she'd call, "Katinat, he pooped again." I didn't know then that this wasn't just a chore. It was the beginning of a life script written for me long before I could read it. A cycle of duty, silence, and sacrifice that would take me almost 20 years to break. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. By the time I turned 9, there were already 4 of them. 4 younger siblings who called me before they ever called for our mother. I was their alarm clock, their cook, their babysitter, and their referee. My mother made a chart and taped it to the refrigerator, written in red marker. 5 a.m. wake up and make oatmeal. 6 a.m. dress the kids and walk them to the 7 train. 3 p.m. pick them up after school. 10 p.m. lights out. Pray. Sleep. There were no blank spaces on that chart. No room for friends or play. I followed it like scripture because disobedience meant chaos, and chaos meant punishment. If one of the kids cried while my mother was on a phone call, I was blamed. If one of them scraped a knee, it was because I didn't watch close enough. Our apartment always smelled like soy sauce and baby powder. The TV played Chinese dramas all day, the kind where mothers sacrifice everything and daughters repay them in silence. My mother would sometimes point at the screen and say, "That's how a real daughter acts, dutiful, patient, grateful." One evening, as I scrubbed the kitchen floor, she looked at me and said almost tenderly, "When you grow up and have your own family, your eldest daughter will take care of you. Just like you take care of me now." She smiled like it was a blessing, but to me it sounded like a curse passed down through generations, one woman handing another the same invisible chain. At school, teachers praised me for being mature for my age. They didn't know I wasn't mature. I was exhausted. I memorized multiplication tables while rocking a crib with one foot. I turned homework in late, always smelling faintly of baby lotion. My classmates talked about summer camps and Disney trips. I talked about grocery lists and bedtime schedules. There was a strange pride in my mother's eyes when she introduced me to guests. "This is my daughter, Katinat. She's like a little mother already." The guests would laugh and say, "How responsible." I would smile, but inside I felt like I was disappearing. Like every compliment was another nail sealing the box around me. By 14, the word childhood felt foreign. I woke up before dawn, cooked, washed, folded, then rushed to school half asleep. My father rarely spoke. He'd nod from the sofa, beer in hand, satisfied that the house ran smoothly. He believed order was love. I learned early that obedience was survival. That same year, my mother handed me a leather-bound notebook. "Write everything you do," she said. "Every diaper changed, every meal cooked, every hour spent helping your brothers." The cover was stamped in gold letters. Katinat duty log, 5 a.m. 11:30 p.m. It wasn't a journal. It was a ledger of servitude. Each page reminded me of my debt to them, how much I owed for simply being born first. When I told my parents that I wanted to take advanced placement classes to prepare for college, my father didn't even look up from the TV. "Cancel them," he said flatly. "Family comes first. You can't be thinking of college while your mother is pregnant again." My mother nodded, rubbing her belly. "We need you more than any school does." That night I cried quietly into my pillow, trying to imagine a version of life that belonged to me. I didn't know what I wanted to be. Maybe a teacher, maybe a chef, maybe just a girl who could sleep in on Saturdays. But I knew this. If I didn't escape soon, I'd spend my whole life living someone else's dream. So I started hiding money. I worked part-time at a copy shop on Main Street after school, earning $12 an hour. My mother thought I volunteered at the library. Each night I slipped a few bills into a small box I'd hidden inside an old pad wrapper under the sink, somewhere I knew she'd never look. Every crumpled note was a seed of freedom. Sometimes when the train rattled by outside, I'd close my eyes and picture it taking me away, to Manhattan, to NYU, to a place where no one would shout my name followed by "Bring the baby." I didn't dare to dream out loud. Dreams were dangerous in our house. Then one Tuesday a letter arrived with my name on it. Katinat Chen, class of 2023, New York University. Full scholarship. I was on the F train when I opened it, standing between strangers who smelled like rain and coffee. My eyes filled with tears. For the first time I wasn't mommy or the eldest. I was someone who had earned a name that was mine. I came home clutching the letter like it was oxygen. My mother was folding laundry. I started to speak, but she interrupted me. Her face was unreadable. "Don't get too excited," she said softly. "I have something to tell you." She laid her hand on her stomach. "The doctor says it's twins." The word sliced through the air. Twins. I stared at her belly, then at the letter still trembling in my hand. The weight of it all, the responsibility, the duty, the endless circle, crashed down again. My father walked in and smiled proudly, not at me, but at the promise of 2 more mouths to feed. "Looks like you'll have your hands full again," he said. That night I sat in the dark, holding my acceptance letter under the glow of my desk lamp. The paper that had once felt like freedom now felt like a taunt, reminding me of everything I could never have. My mother called from the living room, her voice sweet but sharp. "Katinat, don't forget to pack the diaper bag for tomorrow. The cycle doesn't stop just because you got a letter." She was right. The cycle didn't stop. Not yet. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into the leather duty log, and whispered to myself, "One day I'll leave and I won't come back." It wasn't rebellion yet. It was only a thought, small and fragile. But even the smallest thought can be the crack that lets the light in. The day everything fell apart didn't start like a disaster. It began like every other morning in our apartment. Chaotic, loud, filled with the smell of burnt oatmeal. My youngest brother, Ben, was feverish and clingy, his little face red and slick with sweat. The thermometer blinked 103 degrees Fahrenheit. My mother was live streaming on WeChat, selling homemade dumplings to pay for diapers. My father was at work, unreachable. I held Ben against my chest as he whimpered. His body was burning, but there was no car, and Medicaid clinics were a maze of waiting lines and numbers. I carried him on the 7 train through Queens, his breath shallow, my arms trembling. The entire time one thought pulsed in my head: the scholarship deadline. The NYU paperwork was due at 3 p.m. Proof of financial need, residency, and acceptance forms. Without that, my full ride offer would vanish. I told myself I'd drop Ben off, get him checked, then run home and submit it online. But every clinic was full. Every nurse told me to wait. By the time Ben finally stopped shaking and drifted to sleep on my shoulder, the clock read 3:11 p.m. I missed it. When I got home, the sun was setting behind the brick buildings of Flushing. The house smelled of garlic and frustration. My mother sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. I stood there, my backpack still on, holding the crumpled NYU papers. "It's gone," I whispered. "The scholarship. I missed the deadline." She didn't look up. "Then it wasn't meant to be," she said flatly. "You were needed here." My father came home an hour later. When I told him, he sighed, opened a beer, and said the words that would carve themselves into my bones. "NYU is a luxury. Family is the real future." I didn't cry. I just nodded. But something inside me broke quietly, like a bridge giving way under too much weight. I wasn't angry, just hollow. The next morning, my mother handed me a grocery list and told me to pick up baby formula. She talked about the twins growing in her belly and how I needed to prepare. It was as if my dream had been erased overnight, replaced by new duties. That night, when everyone slept, I sat by the window, staring at the F-train lights streaking across the skyline. I imagined the people on board, students, workers, strangers, each going somewhere they chose. I'd never gone anywhere by choice. Every step of my life had been choreographed for me. That's when the thought came. If they won't let me live, I'll build a life in secret. I applied to CUNY Queens College, using the address of a friend from the copy shop. Tuition was cheaper, classes local, manageable. I took the night shift at a cafe called Milky Way on Northern Boulevard. 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., washing cups and steaming milk for tired commuters. I told my mother I was tutoring after school. Every paycheck I hid in a tea canister, sealed tight with masking tape. Every dollar felt like a heartbeat, proof that I was still alive beneath all their control. My only confidant was Mina, my 15-year-old sister. She was quieter than me, observant, and already learning to keep her emotions locked away. One night, while I was counting tips, she stood at the kitchen doorway. "I saw the CUNY email," she said softly. "Don't worry. I won't tell." Her voice was steady, but her eyes shone with something between fear and admiration. "You're not mad?" I asked. "No," she said. "Just promise you'll make it out. Someone has to." From then on, Mina became my shadow. She covered for me when I came home late, helped with chores, and even took care of Ben when he cried. For a few months, life became a secret rebellion. Tiny moments of freedom disguised as routine. Then everything collapsed again. Started with a single mistake. I printed my CUNY acceptance letter at the copy shop and tucked it into my backpack. Somehow my mother found it while cleaning. I came home to see her sitting on the couch, holding the letter like evidence of a crime. "So," she said slowly, "you were planning to abandon us?" Her voice trembled. Not from sadness but from fury. I tried to explain. I told her I could still help, that CUNY was nearby, that nothing had to change. But she only heard betrayal. "You think school is more important than family? Than your own mother?" My father entered, his face already hard. "If you leave this house," he said coldly, "don't come back." He stood there, blocking the doorway, while my mother started to cry loudly, theatrically, like she was auditioning for an audience of neighbors. "You want me to die on the street?" she sobbed. "You want your brothers to starve? Who do you think will feed them if you run off to play college girl?" I felt my throat tighten. "I'm not running away," I said. "I just want a life. Please." But in our house, wanting a life of your own was the same as treason. For days, no one spoke to me. My meals disappeared from the table. My father ignored me. My mother prayed loudly, asking God to forgive the ungrateful daughter. The guilt was unbearable. Every time I saw Ben's little hands reaching for me, every time Mina looked at me with quiet fear, I questioned myself. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I was abandoning them. Yet, when I thought of staying forever, of spending my 20s wiping noses and scrubbing dishes, something inside me screamed. One night, as I was washing clothes, Mina slipped into the room and whispered, "I found something you should hear." She handed me a small USB drive. "Don't open it now," she said. "Wait until you're alone." Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. That night, in the bathroom, I plugged the USB into my old laptop. There were 47 audio files. The first one started with my mother's voice. "Katinat needs to understand her place. The eldest daughter is free childcare. That's how our family survives." Then my father. "If she tries to leave for NYU, I'll call 311 and tell them she abandoned the kids. That'll stop her." I froze. The screen blurred. My parents' voices, calm, deliberate, played over and over, plotting my entrapment like it was just business. I sat there shaking, one hand over my mouth. The person I had been trying to save my whole life was the one holding the knife. When I looked up, my reflection in the mirror didn't look like me anymore. My eyes were swollen, red, but strangely clear. I whispered, "They'll never let me go. Not unless I take myself." That was the night I decided to leave for real. But I didn't know that before I could escape, the family would strike first. The next morning I woke to loud knocks at the door. Uniformed strangers from child services. My mother's face was pale but composed. She told them I had abandoned my siblings to go party in Manhattan. As they spoke, my brothers and sisters clung to my legs, confused. I tried to explain, to show that I was the one cooking breakfast while she slept. But it didn't matter. The system only saw paperwork, and every document named me as the caregiver, her as the provider. They gave me a choice: stay as their unpaid guardian, or let the kids go into foster care. For a moment I almost agreed to stay. The guilt was so familiar it felt like home. But then I remembered the USB, Mina's trembling hands, and my mother's voice calling me free childcare. That's when I realized staying wasn't love. It was surrender. And I wasn't surrendering anymore. Mina waited until everyone was asleep. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the creak of pipes under the floor. She entered my room barefoot, holding something in her hand. A small silver USB, taped at the corners like it had been hidden for weeks. "You need to see this," she whispered. "But not here. They can't know." Her face was pale in the streetlight filtering through the curtains. I could tell she was terrified, but her eyes were steady. When she left, I sat frozen, the USB in my palm feeling heavier than it should. I didn't plug it in until after midnight, when even the neighbor's TV went silent. My hands shook as the files loaded. 47 recordings. All titled with dates, some recent, some from years ago. The first one started with my mother's voice, calm, almost gentle. "Katinat needs to stop pretending she's better than us. College is for Americans, not for girls like her. She should take care of the kids. That's her duty." My father replied, chuckling softly. "Let her think she's in control. Guilt works better than punishment." My stomach turned. I clicked another file. "We'll tell the school she's unstable if she tries to leave," my mother said. "No one wants a crazy babysitter." File after file revealed the same pattern: manipulation, control, strategy. They weren't struggling parents trying their best. They were conspirators maintaining power. Every sacrifice they asked from me was part of a design to keep me trapped. In one of the earliest recordings, I heard my mother talking to a relative in Vietnamese. "I didn't come to America to scrub floors forever. My kids will work for me. That's what family means." Her tone was cold. I recognized that voice. It was the same one that used to tell me I was selfish, ungrateful, broken. I scrolled through all 47 files, listening, pausing, crying. Each clip unraveled another illusion I'd built to survive. For years, I believed I was the problem. The disobedient daughter who couldn't understand Asian values. But hearing their words, hearing the contempt and calculation, it hit me like a tidal wave. I wasn't crazy. I'd been gaslighted my entire life. They'd made me question my sanity so they could keep me compliant. They'd told relatives I was unstable, told teachers I was emotionally unfit, told neighbors I was lost. Every story they spun turned me into the villain of their survival narrative. I cried until dawn. Not because of what they said, but because I finally understood how deliberate it all was. The guilt I carried wasn't born from love. It was engineered. The next morning, Mina sat beside me while I played one of the recordings again. She kept her eyes on the screen. "I recorded them for months," she said quietly. "I knew something was wrong, but no one believed me either." I took her hand. "You could have been caught." "I didn't care," she said. "I just wanted you to know you weren't crazy." For the first time, someone had confirmed what I'd felt for years. I wasn't the villain. I was the scapegoat. But the revelation didn't set me free right away. It made me dangerous because now I had proof. And proof in our family was a crime. 2 days later, the family tribunal began. It wasn't a courtroom, but it might as well have been. My grandmother flew in from Texas. My uncles and cousins gathered in the living room, forming a semicircle like a jury. My parents sat in the center, crying and shaking their heads. They told everyone I was mentally unstable, violent, obsessed with revenge. When I entered, every eye was on me. "You embarrassed us," my father said. "You accused your own mother of lies," my grandmother hissed. "How dare you?" I tried to explain. I pulled out the USB, my last defense. "Just listen to this," I begged. "Please. It's all here, the recordings. You'll understand." My uncle grabbed it from my hand and sneered. "Fake," he said. "You probably edited it." Another cousin chimed in. "She's always been dramatic. I told you she needed therapy." That was when I realized the script had already been written. I wasn't there to defend myself. I was there to be convicted. Within hours, they drafted a statement, a family affidavit claiming I was psychologically unstable, prone to hallucinations and paranoia. My mother even produced a forged document from a clinic, showing a diagnosis of borderline disorder. The next morning, a restraining order arrived. I was prohibited from contacting or approaching my younger siblings. It was over. I slept in my car that night, parked behind a laundromat near Roosevelt Avenue. The air smelled like detergent and gasoline. I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I really am broken." The loneliness was unbearable. I missed Mina, the only person who still saw me as human. Every part of me wanted to drive back, knock on the door and apologize, even for things I didn't do. That's how deep the conditioning went. But the universe, in its cruel irony, has a way of revealing truth through collapse. 2 weeks later, I received a call from a legal aid volunteer at the local shelter where I'd asked for help. "You might want to come in," she said. "There's been a development." At the office, she handed me a thick envelope, official court papers. "The city's reviewing your family's welfare files," she said. Someone submitted an anonymous tip. Inside the folder were documents I'd never seen before: welfare benefit applications, falsified signatures, and fabricated child care claims. My mother had been collecting state benefits under my name, listing me as an unpaid caregiver to qualify for additional checks. She'd been doing it for years. The city investigators cross-checked her statements and found inconsistencies: school attendance records, income mismatches, even bank transfers to an account under her maiden name. Within a month, the case turned. The same social services that had once labeled me unfit now subpoenaed my parents. When the truth surfaced, it felt unreal, like watching a play where the villain forgets her lines. My mother, who'd always preached about family honor, was suddenly on record for welfare fraud. During the court hearing, the judge listened to the USB recordings. One by one, the files played in the silent courtroom. My parents sat frozen as their own words condemned them. "Let her think she's in control. Guilt works better than punishment." Each phrase echoed like a hammer, striking the years of manipulation I'd endured. When it ended, the judge looked at me, then at them. "This young woman," he said slowly, "is not delusional. She's been systematically gaslighted by her own family." The restraining order was revoked. The false mental health record was erased. The court ordered an investigation into my mother's fraud case. But victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing among ruins. The house of lies had collapsed, and I was the only one left breathing. That night, I drove to the Hudson River, parked, and watched the lights ripple across the water. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was free, and freedom, I realized, doesn't come from winning. It comes from finally seeing the truth without flinching. Mina texted me later that night. "They're gone. Grandma took the boys to Texas. Mom's phone was confiscated. You were right all along." I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the message until my eyes blurred. Because beneath all the revelations and legal victories, there was one quiet truth left. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted to be believed. And now at last I was. The courtroom was tense. My parents sat side by side, dressed neatly as if they were attending church, their hands folded, eyes darting between the judge and the lawyer. I sat across from them, hands trembling but steady enough to hold the stack of evidence: the USB, the welfare records, the documents Mina and I had gathered piece by piece like survivors collecting fragments of truth. The judge listened patiently as the city's social services investigator read aloud the findings. My mother had received $21,600 per year in childcare subsidies for nearly a decade, all under the claim that she personally cared for her minor children. But every hospital form, every school emergency contact, every medical authorization had my signature. The investigator, a woman named Johnson, looked up from her folder. In every documented instance, Ms. Katinat Chen was the one providing primary care. Her parents misrepresented that to the state to obtain financial gain. My father shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. My mother began to cry softly, her face buried in a tissue. The same act that had once worked on me, on teachers, on church members, it didn't work here. The judge wasn't swayed by tears. When the FBI audio analysis report was read out, confirming that the 47 recordings were authentic, a silence fell over the courtroom so deep I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. My father tried to interject, mumbling something about misunderstandings and cultural values. The judge banged his gavel once. "Enough," he said. "This is not cultural. This is coercion." For the first time in my life, an adult with authority was standing on my side. My knees went weak with relief. Then came the moment no one expected. The restraining order was lifted immediately. The judge ordered a full investigation into my parents' misuse of government funds and their emotional and financial exploitation of their own children. The next morning they were gone. The apartment was empty, stripped of everything except the furniture too heavy to move. The drawers were left open, the calendar still hanging on the fridge. Frozen at the week, everything fell apart. Mina called me crying. "They took the kids," she said. "They packed them in the van and left." It was 3 in the morning when I received the alert. NYPD was tracking a minivan matching the description near the George Washington Bridge. They were heading south, supposedly toward Florida. My heart stopped. I knew my parents, they weren't going on a trip. They were running. Mina texted again minutes later. "They said we're going to Disney, but there are only winter clothes in the bags." By dawn it was over. The police had intercepted the van at the toll gate. 5 children were found asleep in the back seat, unhurt but confused. My parents were arrested on the spot for custodial interference and welfare fraud. When I saw the news headline online, "Queens couple arrested for welfare scheme and child custody violation," I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt empty, like someone had cut a cord that had been strangling me for years. A few weeks later, I stood again in family court, this time not as the accused, but as a guardian. Mina sat beside me, barely 18 but with eyes that had already seen too much. The court granted us temporary custody of our siblings. We were given a modest apartment in Long Island City, 3 bedrooms, sunlight through the windows, a view of the 7 train rumbling by. It was the first home that felt ours. The city offered support, a monthly childcare stipend of $1,200, a legal babysitter for 20 hours a week, therapy for all the kids, and rent capped at $800. It wasn't much, but it was stability, something we'd never known before. I remember that first night in the new apartment. The kids were asleep. Mina was labeling drawers with masking tape, socks, school stuff, snacks. I sat by the window watching the train lights streak past and whispered to myself, "The cycle ends here." The next morning, for the first time in years, I made breakfast not out of obligation but love. The oatmeal wasn't perfect. The kids teased me for burning the toast. But laughter, real laughter, filled the kitchen. Ben, the youngest, looked up at me with sleepy eyes and asked, "Are you my mommy?" My heart clenched. Mina smiled and said gently, "She's your sister, remember?" Ben blinked, then nodded. "Sister Kat." And that was it, the moment the spell broke. The title mommy, that had been forced on me for 19 years, was finally gone. I was no longer a substitute parent, no longer a ghost haunting someone else's family. I was simply me. Days turned into weeks. We built a new rhythm: school, work, home. I attended classes at CUNY during the day, balancing textbooks and grocery bags on the same subway seat. Mina worked the night shift at the Milky Way Cafe, returning home when the sun began to rise. We left notes for each other on the fridge. Dinner in the oven. Don't forget therapy at 4. Proud of you. We weren't a normal family, not yet. But we were a real one. When the court sentences came in, I didn't attend. I already knew the outcome. 30 months in prison for both parents, restitution of $38,000, and an ongoing fraud investigation involving my grandmother, who had known everything but stayed silent. At the funeral months later, when my grandmother passed, the family split in 2. Some blamed me. Others whispered that I'd done the right thing. No one dared meet my eyes. Standing there, surrounded by faces that shared my blood but not my truth, I felt an odd calm. They had raised me to believe that obedience was love, that sacrifice was virtue. But what they called duty was just fear disguised as tradition. When I looked at my siblings, healthy, laughing, finally allowed to be children, I realized I hadn't destroyed the family. I had saved it from repeating itself. 2 years later, I submitted an essay to a scholarship competition titled, Breaking the Eldest Daughter Syndrome in Immigrant Families. It told my story, the duty, the manipulation, the escape, and the rebirth. When I received the acceptance letter from NYU, this time it was different. There were no tears of fear, no dread of guilt, just quiet pride. On graduation night, I walked across the stage in my purple gown. From the crowd below, I heard familiar voices shouting my name. Mina stood with the kids, holding a banner that read, Katinat, first in family TO graduate. My vision blurred. For so long, I believed I needed to hate my parents to be free. But standing there, I understood something deeper. Freedom wasn't the absence of them. It was the choice not to become them.